this sort of tedious anti-vax stuff,
Excuse me? Excuse me, Jonathan Reynolds. How dare you? How dare you? I am so fed up, and so are my listeners. I'm asking you to produce the scientific basis for you claiming that you feel a policy works when it's a massive infringement of our civil liberties. And you've just basically accused me of being anti-vax. Today, the Prime Minister is meeting with his cabinet to discuss a review of the Plan B restrictions. Would you, in the Labour Party, would you support an end to all Plan B restrictions, including mask mandate in some public places, vaccine passports in some venues, and, of course, that work from home guidance to end on the 26th of January?
Yes, we've talked already about how we've got to learn to live with COVID. That's a phrase the government themselves have used. But I would like in that plan, Julie, it's some real practical things. So obviously that's going to need continued access to testing. I think we're going to need to retain in some way the tremendous volunteer effort on standby in case we need it. Again, sick pay, both who's eligible for sick pay and the level it's paid at. Isolation is clearly going to be a part of that going forward. And things like ventilation in schools. So I just hope it is a really practical, honest take on what we can do to move to a situation where we're not living under restrictions, because they've not been pleasant, they've not been easy for anyone, and people's adherence to those did make a difference, even if they feel the people at the top weren't adhering to them. But that's what we need. And I think, I worry, frankly, that this is simply being brought forward as a distraction. This announcement, sorry, not the plan, the announcement is brought forward to try in some way distract the Prime Minister.
But if you would support the end of those restrictions, you accept that the science is clear that they aren't needed right now. And bearing in mind that a number of your front benchers were calling for there to be more than Plan B restrictions back in December and saying should go further. There was some talk about, introducing the rule of 6, restrictions on people could do meet indoors, restrictions on hospitality, a lot of the things that we have seen in other countries. The Prime Minister, we were told it was a gamble. Well, the Prime Minister made the right decision, didn't he? We see cases go up, we've seen them come down again without the restrictions that your party wanted.
No, I don't accept that picture at all, Julia.
Which bit of it's not true?
Well, we didn't call for more restrictions.
Yes, you did. It's all on video. I mean, it's almost like sometimes the MPs, whichever party is, think that we don't have eyes and ears.
No, there is a deliberate attempt from the Conservative Party to try and portray that.
No, I've watched the videos. Wes Streeting and others, the Shadow Health Secretary, talking about the other sort of restrictions that should be considered.
Politics of trying to put that across. What is true is we would have had no restrictions at all, no health advice or scientific advice followed at all, if we hadn't stepped in to vote in the national interest to make sure the Prime Minister wasn't dependent on his own MPs. I accept that and I welcome that, because there had to be one political party acting in the national interest. There were clearly very significant concerns that came from our advisors at that time, but we didn't call for a lockdown. We know the burden that...
I didn't say you called for a lockdown specifically, but they wanted more restrictions, rule of 6 and limits on hospitality. They were those things were itemised and listed by Wes Streeting in an interview by the Shadow Health Secretary. I've listened to the interview again.
I've talked about many times where that we always wanted from the beginning a sensible approach to wearing masks on public transport, and particularly...
A sensible approach would involve evidence that they made a difference. Have you ever seen any of that evidence? I haven't.
I feel they've made a difference.
You feel they've made... Oh, well, in that case, Jonathan, if that's the way we make decisions about people's freedoms in this country, if Jonathan Reynolds feels they make a difference...
I just feel throughout things like this, I know it's not your position, but people like me have followed the scientific and medical advice and voted in Parliament.
I'm asking you for... No. Someone saying you should do this is not the same as them producing evidence for that.
How it affects my breathing and the transmission of material from mouth. Of course it's had an effect. So look,
what do you mean, of course it's had an effect? Numerous scientific studies have been done and none of them have shown any significant effect, if any at all.
Well, I feel it's been of benefit. This sort of tedious anti-vax stuff,
Excuse me? Excuse me, Jonathan Reynolds. How dare you? How dare you? I am so fed up, and so are my listeners. I'm asking you to produce the scientific basis for you claiming that you feel a policy works when it's a massive infringement of our civil liberties. And you've just basically accused me of being anti-vax. I am double vaccinated. I have always encouraged people to get the vaccination. That is an outrageous thing to say. I am so fed up of that.
That conversation about restrictions, which we've had many times, you can only follow the scientific and medical advice and act in the national interest. And yes, I do feel the mask mandates have made a difference, and they were a sensible thing, an easy, relatively low-cost thing.
They're not low cost. They're not easy. They're not low cost, and there is no scientific evidence for them. Don't tell me you feel something works if there isn't scientific evidence for it. You're not following the science. I'm sorry, but it's ridiculous. Let's come back to what you wanted to talk about. I know you've got to go, but we've lost a lot of time there. Your new analysis from Labour has revealed that the government's Help to Grow management scheme has only reached 6% of eligible businesses. You're basically saying what the government is doing to help business isn't really helping business. Is that right?
Absolutely right, Julie. And again, I'm sorry for saying those words, anti-vax. I wasn't trying to besmirch your reputation in that. It's a conversation we've had many times about restrictions I was referring to. Look, the thing is, on this programme from the government, it's another example of great presentation, a great release. It looks good. This is supposed to be a business mentoring scheme. But you look at the detail. Less than 1/5 of 1% of eligible businesses in the UK have been reached by this, and it's not good enough. It doesn't address the main issues the public are facing, which is, again, those big rises in household bills, the impact of inflation, the squeeze in terms of that big rise in taxation and national insurance this year. And we want the government to focus on the things that matter, not the things that might be good launches, good presentations.
Just finally, the cost of living crisis getting worse, inflation up to 5.4%. It's the highest in 30 years. It's going to go higher. We've got more price rises in energy coming as well. How big an effect do you think that's going to have?
Well, I think it's huge. And of course, what that means for food prices, for household items, that will be even more strongly felt than the base rate by the headline rate. But of course, again, you look at things like that energy crisis and the impact that would have, not just on household budgets, but on the further impact that would have on inflation because of the way we calculate it. I think it is reasonable to demand an intervention from the government. They haven't backed our plan. Look, they're the government. They don't have to. Surely they have to put forward their own plan.
OK, I'll let you go. And we've got another interview to get to. Labour MP, Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds. Thank you very much indeed. Final word to Brendan Chilton on this. Brendan, I am so fed up that asking for evidence for restrictions on people's liberties and how they go about their lives is then labelled anti-vax. It's got to stop.
I think every decision the government makes needs to be informed by evidence and by facts.
And they should show us the evidence. If it's so good, show it to us.
It's called transparency and open government. It used to be a normal thing.
It really is extraordinary. I think that this is still carrying on in this day and age. It really is. I gave him a fairly clear view of where I stood on this. He has very sweetly actually apologised and did not intend to insinuate that I was anti-vax. So indeed, I would say most of the people who question these restrictions are not anti-vax. They simply want there to be evidence-based policy making. I know it's crazy, but it might catch on one day.